Well, good morning.
Good morning.
It's so great to have the opportunity to speak with you. For the audience who doesn't know who you are you and what do you do?
My name's Georgene Huang, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Fairy God Boss.
Can you talk a little bit more about Fairy God Boss and what do you do?
Fairy God Boss is the largest career community online for women, and what we do is crowdsource hard to find and hard to ask questions around company culture and jobs and career advice from women themselves. So our site offers free job reviews for and by women on topics that women care about, such as how much flexibility is in their workplace, is there equal pay at my company, and things around gender diversity at work.
Great. And so, Georgene, how would you describe yourself and your personal vision for who you want to be?
I would describe myself as somebody who's tried a lot of different things in life and is very excited to always have an adventure, whatever I do. What I think I'm looking for out of life is to have a really full life, both personally and professionally.
So, in terms of doing a lot of things in life, can you talk a bit about your own career journey?
Sure. A long time ago, my first career was as a musician, as a classical musician. So I'm a classically trained musician who went to conservatory.
Wow.
And ultimately realized that wasn't the right career path for me. I changed my mind early on in my adolescence and decided I was going to go to a traditional university. I studied economics there. And then I went to law school. So then I pivoted to becoming a lawyer for a while. Then I worked in finance. So as you can see, I've already tried a few different things.
And so can you talk a bit more about, where you were in terms of, those different points in your life? And also, why did you start Fairy God Boss? How did you reach the point where you decided you wanted to start the Fairy God Boss?
So a few years ago, I was an executive at a major publishing company. And one day in a management shakeup, I was fired. So that was a very bad day at work for me. And it was particularly awkward timing to be fired because I was 2 months pregnant at the time. So I was pregnant, but not at the point where I was telling people about it and not at the point where I was wanting to talk about it. Most people don't talk about it until they're 3 months into their pregnancy. And that fit me to a T. And so I was going on the job market and interviews, not wanting to ask about maternity leave and how many women were in senior management positions, but really wanting to ask and find out this information. So that's how Fairy God Boss came to be. It was out of this personal experience I had, the frustration of wanting to get at sort of real and authentic stories from women who've been there.
Right. So speaking of authenticity and more about you, can you talk a bit about your background and how your background has influenced your success and who you've become?
Well, I grew up in California. I'm the daughter of immigrants. I actually wasn't born in America, so I'm a first-generation American, although I immigrated to the country very early on.
From China?
From Taiwan.
Taiwan.
That's where I was born. And I think that when you're an immigrant, you try to adapt to this environment around you, and that adaptation is a language adaptation, is a culture adaptation, and I think fundamentally entrepreneurship is about adapting and really being socially aware of the moment you're in and what it takes, mechanically, logistically, practically speaking as well. So I think being an immigrant has helped me in that way, and having to adapt to different professions and different careers has also been a manifestation of that.
And so what would you consider to be your top accomplishments and why?
Well, I am very proud of the community that we've built at Fairy God Boss. I think we've always had this social mission, although we're a for-profit business, of trying to improve the workplace for women through transparency. And I'm a big believer that we are accomplishing that step by step, day by day. I'm also incredibly proud of the family I have. I have 3 young children, and I've been married to a wonderful partner for 8 years. So I would say that these are my 2 most significant achievements in life.
That's great. And so you are a proud parent of 3. Let's talk a bit about parenting, in fact. And also just kind of taking a step back in terms of the way that you grew up and your parents and their parenting style. I'm just kind of curious if you could talk a bit more about that, your parents' parenting style and how that influenced who you've become and what you're doing now.
I would say that I've had four parents in my life, and that's because my parents divorced relatively early in my childhood. And so I had step parents as well as my biological parents. And I also have a half sibling who I didn't grow up with for a long time. But my family background, I guess you could say, also caused me to have to adapt, because when you have a new stepfather and a new stepmother, by definition, you're having to adjust to new household rules and the many cultures within them. So I would say the parenting style I grew up with really depended on which parent you're referring to. Each one of them was a very strong and different personality.
Right. But how would you say that just in general, was there a unifying theme in terms of they kind of took a step back, or were some parents, tiger parents, that hovered over you? Like, just kind of curious, like in terms of the mix of parenting.
I think generally I had pretty hands-off parenting, and I think it was a function of the fact that I grew up essentially with step parents, and my father is probably the most traditional Chinese kind of parent, but a traditional Chinese father sort of leaves a lot of things to gender roles. So left a lot of things to my mother, and then my mother wasn't a very typical Chinese mother. And so ultimately that meant that I had the influence of somebody who had traditional expectations when it came to things like academic success and extracurricular performance, but the person who was quote unquote enforcing it wasn't really doing it. So functionally it ended up being, I think, a much more freewheeling childhood than what you would consider traditionally a tiger parenting upbringing.
Did you feel that as a result you grew up being more independent?
I would say so. I think I'm also the oldest child in my family, and so when you're the oldest child and your parents are a little bit hands-off, you do become independent and have to figure a lot of things out for yourself.
Right. So you have 3 kids now, and I am really curious in terms of your own parenting style, and especially with 3 kids and having such an amazing career, running a company, I'm sure that keeps you so busy. How do you manage that work-life balance, and in particular, if you would talk about your parenting style?
Sure. I would agree that running a company is extremely demanding from a work-life balance perspective. I always say it's more like a 5 to 9 job rather than a 9 to 5 job. And children obviously are also, especially at this age when they're so young, I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a baby. They require essentially round-the-clock attention from someone. And so we decided, my husband and I, that if we were going to do this, which is this being that I have a company, he also is an entrepreneur,
Wow.
we had to have a live-in nanny. And so a lot of people don't talk about their childcare choices, but it's effectively the only thing that made our careers and our family life possible. And so my parenting style is that I believe that we have to share responsibilities, and I picked a partner who really believes in equal parenting and who's just as involved with school and homework and bathing and cooking and all of that as I am. And we've also picked an extremely competent leader-like nanny, I would say. Someone who really takes the initiative to do things without being asked. And she's an integral part of our family and household.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I had mentioned to you before that I developed a framework that I call present parenting, which is about being present for your kids when they really need you, as opposed to being there with them every moment of the day. Being present in terms of being attentive to them when you're actually together.
Right.
And providing them with 3 important gifts in life: the gifts of opportunity, empowerment, and inspiration. And I'm just kind of curious, this is the first day that you're hearing about this present parenting approach, but to what extent do you adopt this in the way that you parent your children?
I think the most important thing that you said is, to me, that resonates, is about being present. And in the day and age where we have our phone with us all the time and work boundaries are very blurry because you can take your work home with you in the form of a phone. I really just have to have deliberate moments where I've shut it off, where I put it down. And so I put it away when I get home, and I don't really pick it up again until they're asleep. And that's my way of creating space and time for my children. And similarly on weekends, I check my phone very rarely. We're not Jewish, but I always thought that the sort of Saturday Seder experience, because I grew up in New York, I've spent so much time in New York City that I have friends who turn off their devices on Saturdays. And I've always thought of that forced family time in a way that was just really nice. It had clear boundaries. Everyone understood that was a day for family. And so we kind of adopted something like that.
That's great. That's great. I think, it's really important, especially in this age of devices. So let's talk a little bit about the polling and power frameworks. As you know, polling is a framework that I created based on my mother's name for how do you propel yourself and others to success, and those key considerations, of persevering for your priorities and passions and your vision for your authentic self. O for others, helping others to succeed. L for lead, which is about being proactive and driving change. I inspire, which is about exuding that confidence and conviction for what you believe in, inspiring others to follow you. N for network, which is about establishing, building, and leveraging relationships to make things happen. And G is for grow, which is about embracing adversity, diversity, change, and failure, and always pushing yourself to be better. So I'm curious, to what extent does that framework resonate with you, and maybe you can share a story in terms of how you have applied polling in your life, in your career?
Well, I think we touched on some of those principles already. So P, prioritization, is absolutely key for me because I'm busy. A lot of people are busy. A lot of women who try to do lots of things are busy, and those are the people I think about the most. And I think if you don't prioritize, you're just not going to accomplish your goals and grow in the way that you want to. But that does mean having to pick. And I think that leads to O, which is about other people. You have to help other people help you, and you have to pick the right people to be around so that your prioritizations don't fall apart.
Right.
So that's just two examples. I've talked a little bit about my personal work-life balance and how that matters, but it's also in picking my teammates and my colleagues and my business partners, a big part of that as well.
Right. And clearly you do a great job of inspiring as well with all the great work that you do. And I being a very important element of polling.
Yeah, I think the way I think about inspiration is about doing stuff that makes a difference in other people's lives. And so that kind of ties into our company's mission, obviously. Because I think that every single woman who is brave enough to use her voice to try to improve or sort of share what she knows with other women is an inspiration, because she didn't have to do that. She's taking a risk, right? To review your employer and your job. Almost nobody works in a perfect place. And so to take that risk is a real inspiration. And so all of these women in the Fairy Godboss community really inspire me.
That's fantastic. So, actually, a lot of the things that we talked about, prioritization is really key. And interestingly, so I came up with the Power Managing What Matters framework separately. But interestingly, the P is the same as the P in polling because it is about priorities. And so some of the other elements of the Power framework include, obligations, ensuring that what you're doing is aligned with your obligations, worthwhile activities in terms of having the impact that you're seeking. E is for energy, which is about, doing things that energize you and that are aligned with your energy. And R is resources, doing things that you actually have resources for. And so I'm curious in terms of, we talked a bit about priorities. In terms of the other elements of power, how have those played into, maybe a story that you can share or how you conduct your daily life?
So I would say that one of the most important things to me is making sure that there's something meaningful in the way that I spend my time. And I think I chose to be an entrepreneur because I got to focus on things that energized me and gave me energy. So I've worked in lots of different jobs, as I mentioned, and one of the ways that I ultimately decided to be an entrepreneur, beyond just having this personal experience being fired at a bad time, was I realized that I only have a certain amount of time left, and in order to have sort of the impact that I wanted to, and to give me the energy I needed every day to have a family that was a young and growing family, and also go to work and not sort of dread it every day, I had to sort of control what I was doing. And so the decision to become an entrepreneur was about making sure that there was energy and power that came to me from the choices that I made.
Right, right. So probably the energy piece resonates the most with you.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think if you're trying to do a lot of things, you need to get that energy from somewhere. And for me, it's the meaning in my work.
Right, right, right. That's great. So let's talk a bit about challenges that you have faced in the past, and challenges actually specific to your background that may have been caused by your background.
Well, I would say you asked about my childhood, and one of the things about my childhood was that because I was a first generation American, I probably was just shyer and quieter than somebody who just felt naturally comfortable in her environment. And that was something that I had to overcome with a lot of practice. And confidence is something that takes time to build, but I think it's also related to confidence building. So I would say that I've sort of overcome my sort of natural introversion in order to have to speak on behalf of my company, in order to speak on behalf of myself, both, throughout my life as a student, and then as an employee, and then as a manager, and now as an entrepreneur and representative of my company. I have to speak all the time. I mean, I no longer consider myself introverted. I don't really think in those terms anymore. But for sure, you would have pegged me as that quiet, shy kid that wasn't going to use her voice when she was younger.
So do you have any recommendations for people who may be dealing with the same issue?
I would say practice. I know it sounds awfully old-fashioned, but you get better every time you do something. So that means accepting that you're going to fail sometimes. It's not going to feel good, but you have to practice.
In terms of diversity and inclusion,
Yes.
what would you say are the primary calls to action, both on an individual level and also on an organizational level? Like, what should individuals, like you and I, do, or individuals within companies that may not necessarily be in a position of power, think about, as well as the organizations themselves?
I think now that I'm running a company, I realize that many employees have much more power than they think they have. First of all, nothing stops you from going to your CEO, to your manager, to your manager's manager, and having a conversation about anything. And if they really are a good person, a good employee, they will listen to you. It's just a human conversation. And I think people really underestimate the impact they can have when it comes to changing policies and culture by just speaking up.
Right. And then from an organizational perspective?
I think from an organizational perspective, leaders have to lead by example. So publishing diversity data and treating it like a business objective means that you're taking it seriously, and if you do that, then your employees will also take it seriously.
So you gotta lead by example, top down.
That's right.
But as you mentioned, we all have a responsibility, regardless of whatever level we are, to push diversity and inclusion forward.
Right.
Great. And the last question that I have is, what is a surprising fact about yourself that most people would not guess?
Most people probably wouldn't guess that I went through a period of time where I really liked physical thrills. I liked jumping out of planes. I liked going on level 5 water rafting trips, and I got a motorcycle license.
Motorcycle license.
Which I don't use today.
Wow. But hey, it's good to have it. Well, it was such a pleasure to interview you today. Best of luck, and looking forward to collaborating in the future.
Thank you, Betty.